The Lord sees everything. Proverbs 15:3. What if the silence you endured was proof, not neglect? This video reached you because today you'll see why what was hidden was witnessed, why delays turned into action, and how God stepped in without warning. If you were wronged, overlooked, or tested quietly, stay here. Clarity begins now. God saw what no one else acknowledged, not the version of events people repeated, not the surface-level story that was convenient for others to believe, but the full truth. He saw your intentions when they were questioned, your honesty when it was doubted, and your restraint when you could have defended yourself but chose peace instead. There were moments when you were silently blamed, subtly pushed aside, or treated unfairly, and it felt like no one noticed. But nothing escaped God's awareness. While people judge based on appearances, reactions, or rumors, God judges based on the heart. He saw what motivated your actions, the effort you put in, and the integrity you held onto even when it cost you something. When others overlooked your contribution or misread your silence as weakness, God understood exactly why you stayed quiet. He saw the strength it took to endure without becoming bitter. This is important because many people struggle with the feeling of being unseen. You may have asked yourself, did any of this even matter? It did. Every choice you made when no one was applauding carried weight. God doesn't miss details, and He doesn't forget moments of quiet endurance. What went unnoticed by people was fully recognized by Him, and that recognition is what set everything else in motion. Silence was never absence. It only felt that way because you expected noise, signs, or immediate correction. But God doesn't rush to interrupt every moment of injustice. Sometimes He allows silence because it gives truth room to stand on its own. While you were waiting for answers, protection, or fairness, God was observing patterns, motives, and choices without interference. In silence, people reveal who they really are. Words stop performing, excuses wear thin, and behavior speaks clearly. God allows this space so nothing is unclear when the moment to move arrives. If He had stepped in too early, the full picture wouldn't have formed. The silence wasn't abandonment, it was permission for everything hidden to surface naturally. For you, that silence was uncomfortable. You questioned yourself, replayed conversations, and wondered if you were being ignored. But what was actually happening was preparation. Silence strengthened your discernment, matured your patience, and kept you from reacting in ways that could have worked against you. It protected your integrity. God's silence is often a shield. It prevents premature conflict, emotional damage, and spiritual exhaustion. When He finally moves, it's precise, undeniable, and complete. Nothing needs to be explained because the truth has already spoken for itself. What felt like waiting was actually alignment happening quietly, exactly when it needed to. The test was never about them, it was always about you. What mattered most wasn't what they did, but how you responded when you had every reason to react. You were placed in situations where anger, revenge, or self-justification would have been easy. Instead, you chose restraint, dignity, and self-control, even when no one was watching. That choice revealed more about your strength than any confrontation ever could. God pays close attention to reactions under pressure. Anyone can act well when things are fair, but character is exposed when things are not. You were tested in moments of imbalance, where your response determined whether you would grow or repeat old patterns. Every time you resisted the urge to explain yourself or prove your worth, you passed a test without even realizing it. What's powerful is that you didn't know you were being evaluated. You weren't performing for approval. You were simply being yourself, guided by inner values rather than emotion. That authenticity mattered. It showed maturity, trust, and readiness for what comes next. This is why the outcome shifted in your favor. The situation didn't change because you argued harder or demanded justice. It changed because you demonstrated stability when instability surrounded you. God didn't need you to fight, He needed you to stay grounded, and you did. God allowed them to reveal themselves fully. That can be one of the hardest parts to accept, especially when their actions affected you. You may have wondered why the behavior continued, why it wasn't stopped sooner, or why it seemed unchecked. But exposure doesn't happen through interruption, it happens through consistency. When people are given space, their true nature shows without effort. Over time, patterns become undeniable. Words start contradicting actions, Intentions surface through repeated choices. What once looked confusing begins to make sense. God allowed this process to unfold so nothing would be questioned later. There would be no doubt about who acted with integrity and who did not. No explanations would be needed. This wasn't about punishment, it was about clarity. If things had ended too early, the truth would have remained incomplete. By allowing the situation to run its course, God ensured that what was hidden could no longer stay hidden. You didn't need to expose anyone or defend yourself. Time did that work for you. Most importantly, this protected you. You were spared from carrying the burden of proof or the weight of confrontation. God handled the revealing so you wouldn't have to. What became visible wasn't created by you, it was already there. And once revealed, it changed everything permanently. The delays you experienced were strategic, not punitive. It may have felt like things were moving too slowly or that progress was being withheld without reason, but timing plays a critical role in protection. God doesn't delay to frustrate you, He delays to position you. Moving too early could have exposed you to outcomes you weren't meant to handle yet, or placed you in environments that would have limited your growth. Waiting refined your perspective. It gave you space to see situations more clearly, to detach emotionally, and to strengthen your sense of self. What felt like lost time was actually preparation time. During the delay, certain doors quietly closed, distractions fell away, and your priorities shifted. You were being preserved from outcomes that would have cost you peace, clarity, or direction. Delays also prevented premature elevation. If things had worked out sooner, you might have settled for less than what you were truly meant for. The pause ensured that when movement finally happened, it would be stable and lasting, not rushed or fragile. You weren't being held back, you were being aligned. Now the timing makes sense in hindsight. You can see how certain things had to unfold first. The delay wasn't a setback, it was a safeguard. And because of it, what comes next arrives with strength, readiness, and long-term clarity. God was watching you during your weakest moments, not just your strongest ones. He saw the nights you struggled silently, the doubts you didn't voice, and the exhaustion you carried while still showing up. These were the moments no one applauded, yet they mattered the most. Strength isn't only measured in confidence, it's revealed in perseverance when confidence fades. You may have felt unsure, drained, or close to giving up, but you didn't abandon your values. You still chose honesty, patience, and self-respect even when your energy was low. That consistency spoke louder than any public achievement. God noticed how you treated others when you were hurting and how you stayed grounded when it would have been easier to shut down or lash out. These moments carried weight because they were real. There was no performance, no audience, just choices made in private. God honors sincerity, especially when it's costly. What you endured without recognition became part of the reason protection and change were activated. Your weakness didn't disqualify you, it qualified you. It proved humility, resilience, and trust. And those quiet moments, when you felt the most vulnerable, were exactly when your character was being sealed. Betrayal was the moment divine intervention began. What hurt you emotionally also triggered a shift spiritually. When trust was broken, when loyalty was ignored, and when intentions were taken for granted, it crossed a line you didn't need to defend yourself against. Betrayal carries its own weight, and God does not overlook it. You didn't have to expose what happened or seek revenge. The moment betrayal occurred, the situation moved out of your hands. God steps in when loyalty is violated and truth is twisted. That's why things started changing without you doing anything. Conversations shifted. Access changed. Certain people lost influence they once had. This wasn't coincidence, it was correction. Betrayal often comes before elevation because it forces separation. It reveals who can't go where you're headed. While it felt painful at the time, it created a clear divide between what was draining you and what was meant to support you. You weren't being rejected, you were being redirected. What they did didn't delay your path, it accelerated it. The betrayal became the signal for God to move you out of a situation that had already reached its limit. And once that line was crossed, restoration and protection followed naturally. God allowed the imbalance for a reason. You may have noticed how others seem to hold more power, influence, or control, while you were left carrying the weight quietly. It felt unfair, and at times it was. But imbalance reveals character faster than equality ever could. When one side has the advantage, intentions become clear without effort. While they relied on position, status, or leverage, you relied on integrity. That difference mattered. The imbalance tested whether you would compromise yourself to regain control or stay grounded without it. By choosing stability over manipulation, you proved you didn't need power to remain whole. That's a rare strength. Imbalance also stripped away false confidence. When support was uneven, you learned how to stand on your own without resentment. You developed clarity, discernment, and inner authority. God used that season to strengthen what couldn't be taken from you. What's important to understand is that imbalance never lasts when it's misused. It exposes weaknesses in those who abuse it and builds resilience in those who endure it. The scale eventually corrects itself, and when it does, the strength you gained becomes the foundation for what comes next. God was also protecting you from becoming like them. In moments of pressure, it's easy to mirror the behavior that caused the harm. You may have felt tempted to respond with the same tactics, control, manipulation, or emotional distance. But restraint wasn't weakness, it was preservation. God was guarding your character, not just your circumstances. If you had reacted the way they did, it might have brought short-term relief, but long-term damage. You would have carried guilt, confusion, or regret that didn't belong to you. By holding back, you kept your values intact. You stayed aligned with who you are, not who the situation tried to turn you into. This protection worked quietly. You were spared from making decisions driven by anger or ego. Instead, you learned how to pause, reflect, and respond with clarity. That discipline strengthened your sense of self and built inner authority. God's protection often looks like restraint. He blocks certain reactions so you don't damage your future. By not becoming like them, you preserved your peace, your integrity, and your direction. And that protection is exactly why you're now stepping forward without carrying their weight. The turning point didn't arrive loudly, it happened quietly. There was no announcement, no dramatic moment where everything suddenly made sense. Instead, something shifted beneath the surface. You may have felt it as a subtle sense of relief, a change in energy, or a calm that replaced constant tension. That was the moment movement began. God often initiates change before it becomes visible. Decisions are made, paths are adjusted, and outcomes are set in motion long before you see results. That's why things feel different now, even if nothing obvious has changed yet. You're no longer stuck in uncertainty. The weight you carried has started to lift. This quiet shift is intentional. It keeps you grounded and prevents unnecessary distraction. You're not meant to chase confirmation or wait for proof. The clarity you feel is enough. It's the signal that alignment has occurred. When God moves, it doesn't always disrupt, it stabilizes. The chaos fades, the urgency dissolves, and you regain your sense of direction. That's how you know the turning point has passed. What comes next unfolds naturally, without force, exactly as it should. What they did created consequences, you didn't. That distinction matters more than you realize. For a long time, you may have carried unnecessary guilt, wondering if you said the wrong thing, waited too long, or should have acted differently. But the outcome you're witnessing now isn't the result of your silence or patience. It's the natural result of choices they made repeatedly. God's system operates on cause and effect, not emotion. Accountability doesn't come from confrontation, it comes from alignment. When actions conflict with truth, integrity, or fairness, consequences follow without needing your involvement. You were never meant to carry responsibility for someone else's behavior. Releasing self-blame is part of restoration. Once you stop internalizing what wasn't yours to hold, clarity returns. You can finally see the situation for what it was, misdirected pressure placed on you because you were stable enough to carry it. That doesn't make it right, but it explains why it happened. Understanding this frees you. You no longer need to justify yourself or replay the past. What unfolded did so on its own terms. God handled the accounting. Your role was simply to remain steady, and you did. God moved things you never could. While you were limited by what you could say or do, He worked beyond your reach. Doors closed that you didn't have the authority to shut. Conversations happened without your presence. Decisions were made in rooms you never entered. None of this required your effort because it wasn't your responsibility to manage. You may have noticed sudden changes, access removed, roles shifted, influence reduced, without explanation. These weren't random events. They were adjustments you could never force without consequences. God handled them cleanly, quietly, and without pulling you into conflict. This kind of movement protects you from backlash. You weren't seen as the cause, so you weren't positioned as the enemy. Your hands stayed clean. While others assumed things happened naturally, divine intervention was already at work behind the scenes. That's why peace returned before understanding did. You didn't need to know how or why everything shifted. You only needed to trust that what you couldn't fix was being handled properly. And it was. God moved what stood in your way without costing you your integrity. Your name was defended without you saying a word. While you stayed quiet, God corrected the narrative in ways you never could. Misunderstandings began to dissolve, false assumptions lost their power, and the truth surfaced naturally. You didn't have to explain yourself or convince anyone. What was real spoke for itself over time. This kind of defense is powerful because it doesn't rely on arguments. When God steps in, clarity replaces confusion without confrontation. People start noticing inconsistencies on their own. Stories change, perceptions shift. You may never hear apologies or acknowledgements, and you don't need them. Restoration doesn't always come through words, it comes through alignment. What once felt like damage to your reputation is now being corrected quietly. The weight of being misunderstood is lifting because it was never meant for you to carry forever. God handled what you couldn't address without compromising your peace. This is why speaking less protected you more. Silence allowed truth to move freely. Your integrity stayed intact, and your name remained guarded. What matters now isn't what was said before, it's what's becoming clear now. Justice is already in motion, even if it doesn't look dramatic. It rarely arrives with noise or visible confrontation. Instead, it shows up through quiet shifts, removed opportunities, stalled progress, and subtle reversals that feel unexplained from the outside. What's happening now isn't random, it's correction unfolding in real time. You may notice that things are no longer working the way they once did for certain people. Effort no longer produces the same results. Influence fades, control weakens. This isn't punishment, it's balance being restored. God doesn't need to announce justice, He simply realigns outcomes. For you, peace arrived before proof. That calm you feel is confirmation that the weight has lifted. You're no longer waiting for validation because it's already happening behind the scenes. Justice doesn't require your attention or your participation. The process is already active. There's nothing you need to chase, confront, or monitor. What was out of alignment is being corrected naturally. And as it unfolds, you're being moved forward, unburdened, clear-minded, and free to focus on what's next. What was taken from you is being replaced, but not always in the same form. Loss creates space, and God never leaves that space empty. Whether it was time, trust, stability, or opportunity, the removal wasn't meant to diminish you, it was meant to clear the way for something better aligned. Replacement doesn't always look like restoration at first. It often arrives as new clarity, healthier connections, or a sense of direction you didn't have before. What you gain now fits who you've become, not who you were when the loss happened. That's why it feels steadier, not rushed. You may realize that what you thought you wanted no longer holds the same value. The replacement carries less confusion and more peace. It doesn't drain you, it supports you. God doesn't just return what was lost, He improves the outcome. This shift confirms that nothing was wasted. The loss served a purpose, and the replacement reflects growth. You're not getting back the past, you're receiving something that matches your present strength and future direction. You are entering a protected phase now. Things feel quieter, clearer, and less chaotic than before. The constant pressure to explain yourself, defend your position, or brace for conflict is fading. That's not coincidence, it's coverage. God doesn't move you forward without securing the space around you. In this phase, discernment replaces confusion. You're more aware of what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Situations that once drained you no longer have access. Boundaries feel natural, not forced. You're not reacting, you're choosing. Protection also shows up as stability, fewer emotional swings, less urgency, more grounded decisions. You're no longer pulled in multiple directions because alignment has narrowed your focus. What's meant for you stays, what isn't falls away without effort. This phase isn't about isolation, it's about peace. You're being shielded from unnecessary battles so you can build without interruption. God is guarding your progress now, ensuring that what comes next grows in a space that's secure, clear, and sustainable. Some people will never get closure, and that's intentional. Closure doesn't always come through conversations, explanations, or admissions. Sometimes it comes through distance, elevation, and peace. God doesn't require everyone to understand your path, only that it continues forward. You may notice that certain connections ended without resolution. Questions were left unanswered. Apologies never came. That doesn't mean something is unfinished. It means the lesson was complete. Closure arrived the moment you stopped needing validation from those who couldn't offer it. Seeking explanations can keep you tied to what you've already outgrown. God removes the desire to revisit old pain so you don't reopen doors that were closed for your protection. Not every chapter needs a summary. Some simply end because their purpose is fulfilled. Letting go without answers is a sign of growth. You're no longer defined by what happened, you're defined by where you're going. And that forward movement is the only closure that truly matters. You were never meant to fight this alone. What you faced required more than effort or strategy. It required advocacy beyond your reach. That's why pushing harder or defending yourself never felt right. God didn't ask you to carry the burden of proving your worth or correcting every wrong. When you stopped resisting and let go of control, strength replaced struggle. Surrender didn't weaken you, it aligned you. It allowed God to step in where human effort would have only caused exhaustion. Battles you outgrew were taken out of your hands. This shift explains why things resolved without your involvement. You didn't lose your voice, you gained protection. God fought in ways you couldn't, at levels you never accessed, without pulling you into conflict or chaos. True strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's knowing when to step back and trust the process. You weren't abandoned, you were covered. And because you didn't fight alone, you now move forward without carrying the weight of the fight. This shift isn't temporary. It's not a pause, a break, or a moment of relief that will fade. What changed has settled at the root level. The lessons were learned, the patterns were broken, and there's no need to revisit what already taught you everything it could. You may notice that old triggers don't affect you the same way. The emotional pull is gone. The urge to re-engage or explain has disappeared. That's how you know it's permanent. Growth has replaced reaction. God doesn't repeat lessons once they're complete. When a season ends, it ends fully. You're not being tested in the same way anymore because you've outgrown that level. What comes next operates on a different standard. This permanence brings calm. You're not waiting for things to fall apart again. You trust what's unfolding because it's built on clarity and stability. The shift has already taken hold, and it's here to stay. God moved because the season was complete. Nothing was left unfinished, unlearned, or unresolved on your end. You stayed through the full process, endured what was required, and grew beyond the situation without forcing an exit. Completion isn't about exhaustion, it's about readiness, and you reached it. When a season has served its purpose, God doesn't prolong it. Endurance signals maturity. Consistency signals trust. You didn't quit early, and you didn't harden your heart. That's why movement happened naturally, without struggle or resistance. The shift wasn't rushed, it was timely. Completion brings authority. You don't step into what's next needing approval or explanation. You move forward carrying clarity, stability, and peace. The lessons are integrated, not remembered with pain. What once tested you now sits behind you without power. This is not a pause between chapters, it's the beginning of a new one. God moved because the work was done, and now what unfolds next does so on solid ground, guided by everything you've already become. As we come to the end of this message, remember this truth: nothing you went through was unseen, and nothing you endured was wasted. God saw every moment, every choice, and every quiet act of strength, and He moved at the exact right time. What once felt confusing now makes sense because you've grown beyond it. You're not standing in survival anymore. You're stepping forward with clarity, peace, and renewed purpose. If this message resonated with you, let it remind you that your journey is still unfolding in powerful ways. Trust what's ahead, stay grounded in who you are, and carry this confidence into your next chapter. If you found value here, like this video to support the message, share it with someone who may need encouragement today, and subscribe to Wisdom Sign for more uplifting insights. I'd also love to hear from you. Comment below what this season has taught you or what you're stepping into next. Your story matters, and the best is still ahead.